Wizard. I had too much fun with that. Today we're going to once again continue our series on a new story of humanity, a edition, I suppose, in my terribly long newsletters called the Journal of Techno Wizardry. That's my newsletter, and this whole thing is about like what we can do to change the world for the better, and what I've learned about humanity and what that means for how we change the world. So last time we talked about debunking human nature, and I think I did a good job of doing that, or at least starting with the idea of why our ideas of human nature are inherently flawed. Um, and furthermore, I might have time to talk about this later today, but I was listening to a lot of great podcasts from the Seriously Wrong folks, and they were interviewing or they were talking about Bookchin and social ecology and things like that, and it was phenomenal. And a lot of this stuff they were talking about there is the stuff I'm talking about here. So it was just beautiful. I'll post a lot of that in the description if I don't talk about it. I mean, either way, I'll just post it in there. But anyways, let's jump into this section talking about why we can change the environment. The greater reality, as far as we can tell, is that we are all just animals, that all of life simply exists through sheer chance, compounding on the stuff that works and discarding the stuff that is a detriment. Of course, that's not something many want to hear, and I too think that there are some spiritual meanings and perhaps even designs, but I'll get back to that later. I'm not sure if I ever did really get back into the spiritual stuff, so I need to do that. Might have to do a whole separate newsletter on that because there's a lot to talk about. But anyways, because even if there is some higher power in charge of this, it would still be wrong to view the world as something we are in charge of. Right? That whole idea that we are the masters of the universe or the people or the earth or whatever is just categorically wrong and problematic. This idea, to put in Bookchin's words, right, that we can dominate the ecosystem, we can dominate nature, comes from ourselves dominating ourselves. Really, not even ourselves, but people who want power, specifically those people who are greedy and power hungry, dominating other folks. That's where the entire idea of us thinking that we can dominate and control nature stems from, and it's just wrong. A more useful perception is to realize that everything is behaving in response to the environment. Animals, plants, photons, bacteria, the human psyche, etc. Everything exists in an environment, multiple environments. And the way something interacts with the environment, or the way the environment interacts with things, dictates how things respond in turn. Very simple, simply put, I think. Yes, this gets into my systems-based determinism theory. Oh my gosh, I just now realized that I did not share my screen. I'm over here talking and yip yapping, and I didn't even. Sorry. Whoa, what is going on here? All right, I'm starting over because we're 3 minutes in. um, plus, I mean, anyways, so yes, this gets into my systems-based determinism theory, and that's basically a whole other newsletter, a prior newsletter to this one. You can go check it out if you like. But I went into the whole idea of when I started to learn about systems thinking, which coalesced a lot with a lot of the other stuff I was learning about science and stuff at the time, and I went into how I think determinism is actually a good way of describing the world, but not as the mechanistic way it was described in the early 1900s, but actually in a systematic way. But you can go read that theory later, which you can read about in my last newsletter. But even if you are gung ho about living with the light pollution of free will, that's it is still incredibly useful to realize the impact of the environment on everything. So this light pollution of free will is a kind of metaphor I had for free will in that last newsletter, in which I likened um, the idea of free will to light pollution. Right? It's useful. Right? It comes from a useful thing. Like when we see light is useful for us. Right? We invented this thing of artificial light to light our ways of the unknown and things like that. Right? It's very useful, but it creates a huge amount of pollution in which blocks our sight from the sky, from the majesty of the universe. And because of that, we view the universe, we view the sky in a very limited way nowadays, where most people don't really look up. Most people don't really realize the majesty of the stars, right? And I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I'm sorry. This was just a beautiful thing. And it's not just me that think this. Everybody that's read this um, um, has also agreed. Very beautiful way of describing this. So I'm not going to go through the whole free will debate, but this is what I was thinking. Like right now, this is how we view ourselves, right, and our decisions and things like that. We have a few stars that we can point out and say, yes, that's my decision I did there. That's the path I went down there. So I made this choice, right? This is how we view our free will. But this is the reality. These are all the things, all the choices we made, quote unquote choices we made, all the things that interact with us, interact with our identity. So you making a constellation, right? In the current way, you have this big dipper type of thing. You say, yes, that's a constellation. That's my identity right there, right? But really, it's completely arbitrary, right? The constellations and things that we make throughout the stars is almost completely arbitrary. It's completely up to us, up to our interpretation of what we see, right? And because we don't see much due to light pollution of free will, this, we don't see all of reality that is all the systems, environment, and things that interact and help and really, I would say, decide what we do, but really, impact our quote unquote decisions, right? So this is why I use, that light pollution for. But anyways, let's continue. Ignoring the environment is like trying to ignore the weather when you go outside. You might like to believe you are always warm and dry, but if you walk out into the rain unprotected, you will no longer be so. You can say that you chose to become cold and wet, but obviously that would be silly because you do not control the weather. All right. You simply chose how you responded to the weather. And even that was most likely strongly influenced by your mental environment in terms of culture, knowledge, self awareness. And so you could also include technology and all this other stuff, right? Likewise, we do not necessarily choose our environments, but we do and can respond accordingly to try and make the most of or even change the environment we find ourselves in. However, environment does not mean just the quote unquote natural world. That's what we typically call the natural environment, better described as a geographic ecosystem. The environment is any conditions and surroundings in which something lives. So, the environment which determines how things evolve, the geographic area, as well as the food available, the temperature, the atmosphere, even the other life forms become a part of the environment relative to any one creature. Additionally, the genetic mutations and stellar radiation are part of the environment. The knowledge passed down to offspring is an environment. Thus, culture and society are mental and social environment. So then I went to language, but again, I like to keep this short. I have a few minutes, 2 minutes. We'll keep it like let's try to keep it to that point. But some points here that I'm pretty sure I expanded on later. But again, this is environmental fact is a huge thing because again, we tend to think of our idea of morality and laws and the legal system in society in terms of willpower or in terms of choices, in terms of decisions and accountability and things like that. And yes, those things are important, but they're important in terms of our cultural environment, right? They're important in terms of the context of our kind of high level arbitrary relationships, right? On the deeper level, when it comes down to what really determines, how we make those choices, it's all the systematic things. It's all the environmental factors of your genetics, your technology, your culture, your time span, your diet, your economics. All these things play a huge role into our day-to-day choices. And though we don't really recognize that, and we can't recognize that, right? Our brain is not capable of maintaining all that stuff in working memory, right? So it makes sense that we came up with this idea of free will as a kind of flashlight to walk us through this unknown, right? This space of things that we can't keep all in one mind. But My argument here is that we can, because it's the environment that determines whether or not we change. And so if we change that environment, right, then we can change our behaviors as well. And I'm going to go into this, but basically my argument here is that a large part of the things that we don't like about human nature is actually due to the environments that we ourselves created to, support certain of those bad things like social dominance and greed and violence and things like that. But we'll get into that later. So as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want to discuss about, disagree about, anything. I'd love to have a discussion on this stuff. And have a great day. See ya. Bye bye.